Hi, all. Welcome to the Groundhog Day. Wonderful Students on Ice interviewing three of my women who went to the Arctic or the Antarctic. So what I'm going to ask you to do first is introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself. And then I've been giving all sorts of questions, but I work in this all the time. So just be prepared for some interesting questions. There you go. So we'll go over to Michaela. Go for it. How did you get involved? Who are you? And what did you do with Students on Ice?
Okay, well, hi, everyone. I'm Michaela. I was on the 2018 Arctic expedition. And at the time, I was going into grade 12, but I'm currently in second year university, and I'm at Queen's University in Ontario. And I study chemical engineering. But currently, due to the pandemic, I'm hibernating at my family home in Nova Scotia and Halifax. So that's what's about me right now. And
okay,
yeah, I
okay. We'll do introductions, and then we'll get around to some interesting questions. Okay.
Okay.
We'll move over to Cassandra. Hello, Cassandra. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Which group did you go on in SOI, and what are you doing now?
So I'm Cassandra Elphinstone, and I went on the 2011 Arctic expedition with Students on Ice. And at the time I was in grade 11, going into grade 12. And I went to UBC for university studying conservation biology. And now I'm working on Arctic plant genomics on 2 different species found all around the Arctic, doing my PhD. Also at UBC still. So I'm in Vancouver now in the lab.
Okay. Wow. Thank you, Cassandra. Anna, over to you.
Hi. I was also on the 2018 SOI expedition with Michaela, and I'm also at Queen's in my second year, but I'm studying computer science right now. And I'm from Ottawa, but I'm in Kingston right now.
Okay. All right. Okay, and to all of you, you all know me, but I'm Roslyn Byrne. I'm president of the Leacross Foundation, and we support women in education and STEM. And actually, I was just on Dalhousie's, I was interviewing 2 new positions at Dalhousie and 4 new recipients of scholarships in computer science who are all women at Dal. And so we're continuing that, Hannah, just so you know. We work on education for women. You know, when you went on Students on Ice, we were just happy at the foundation that you were curious, you're interested and interesting, and you understood about community and you wanted to give back. So you had a chance to go on to Students on Ice. How did you figure out about applying to Students on Ice? What was the impetus for you to get going and writing an application? I'll leave it to you. Who would like to go first? Okay, okay, Hannah, go for it. Oh, sorry, okay.
I'll go. I heard about it from friends. I had one neighbor who had gone on a previous year. So I heard about it and I applied one summer and didn't get in and decided to just go for it and apply the next summer. And I ended up getting to go, thanks to Leacross Foundation.
Okay, wonderful. Cassandra, you were second in line there.
I heard about it through a biologist who is helping at our school. And I was involved in the environment club at my school. So it was it lined up with what I was interested in. And I applied one year and also didn't get it. And then applied again. I thought it couldn't hurt and it sounded like a really amazing opportunity and got it, which was a very life-changing experience for me, for sure.
Okay, thank you, Cassandra. Over to you, Michaela.
Yeah, my grandmother actually found an article about Students on Ice and some sort of news forum that she was a part of and sent it to me. So that's where I first heard about it. And growing up being interested in sort of the northern hemisphere, I don't know, whatever you call it, Arctic Circle area, I was pretty inspired to do that. And then similarly to the other girls here, I applied twice before getting in. So that was really like the Leacross Foundation was super awesome and helping us go. So.
Well, to date, we've had over 70 girls who've gone to the Arctic and the Antarctic. And we've also been running Leacross alumni, and some of you already know about that on LinkedIn. And it's been great. We've been doing a Zoom call every month for our alumni. But it's not only for students on ice, it's for all my women in STEM, from biomedical engineers to computer scientists. It's been interesting because it's not about me being the focal point. It's about you all connecting with each other, knowing what you're doing, sharing your stories, and coming up with ideas on how you can be your own community. We did a program called Resilience Through Community with about 20 of my alumni, and it was really well received. About 10 of them were from Students on Ice, and they learned techniques on how to de-stress during this COVID time. It's unprecedented, obviously, you must know that. Also, you being at home and not being at school. So in your idea of the perfect path, what were your plans when you started your degrees? Okay, so I'll start with Michaela. And what have you had to do in order to accommodate this new world right now for women in STEM, but also not at school? So go for it.
Well, I'm not really sure where to start, at what stage here, but I mean, I guess coming, if I just keep the scope to this year, okay. Really going to school, let's see. Well, I guess, so my routine has changed significantly from last year when, you go to everything in person, you have in engineering, we have many hours of classes. So, 7, something like that hours classes a day, and then you come home and you do your homework, and then it's go all the time, and then you go and write your midterms and everything like that. But then this year it's like you wake up, you do your online classes, sometimes, rarely, you have a synchronous event, which is really exciting. And you get to zoom in, and sometimes people will turn on their cameras, but that's not very often, let's be honest. So my first semester was, my courses were very much content based because they pushed our project courses, we have many project courses in engineering. So they were hoping we could be in person second semester to do those.
Yeah.
But while we are not in person, this semester I have like 2 project courses. So now I'm Zooming with my project groups all the time, and we have it's quite interesting because we're in different time zones, and so it's just this coordination factor. And then it's also my groups, like, they're pretty motivated students, which is great, but it's also sometimes a little bit hard because like it's easy to hide is what we've found, is like you can just not join, and it's doesn't seem as accountable, like there's more excuses that come up, so things like that. But for me, I find I have a hard time sitting and staring at a screen all day and just sitting down, and that for me has been a challenge throughout. So yeah, I mean, for me, self-care is definitely a thing that has to be done to maintain my sanity. So yeah, that's, for me, that means like getting outside when I can, and getting some exercise, and just making sure I'm getting some food, because it's not you don't really have a scheduled lunch break and things like that. So yeah, that's and really just putting in a fun, exciting thing to do in the week on a Friday night, even if we can't really go anywhere, if it's just playing a board game or something like that with the people in your house. So that's what it's been looking like for me, but I'm excited to hear about the other girls.
Thank you. You've kind of answered the question beautifully. We'll segue into some other questions after, but it's fascinating. you know, you're in chemical engineering, the anticipation of going to classes all day, working on projects, working in labs. And then suddenly you're realizing you're in front of a computer 10 to 14 hours a day. You have to decide whether or not you're going to get a stand-up desk instead of sitting at a desk. I do now have one. I actually have a stand-up desk. So I've been doing interviews standing up so that I'm not sitting. Today I'm sitting, but and the whole idea of looking forward to, you know, looking forward to meeting other people, event planning, all the things that we would normally, that's just, we just roll on and do it. We're not doing it. So what you just said is a couple of key words, and I'll pass this on to the other two women in a second, is self-care and exercise. So you have to build that into your system while you are working at this, because you are staring into a computer, whether you like it or not. In order to have colleagues or professors or classmates, you are in front of a computer, and that's reality, at least just for this coming semester. So Cassandra, how would you say, particularly this year, how your plans, what has changed, and how are you coping, and what are you doing to cope?
So I have still been working in the lab. I'm growing a lot of plants, so I have to be here, and I'm one of the lucky people who gets to keep coming to campus. And kind of built into that, I have a 16-kilometer bike ride every morning and every evening. So that takes care of my exercise, which has been really great, actually, right now. And yeah, switching to online is astounding. I teach a course on teaching, and having to transfer all of those in-person sessions to 8 hours on Zoom with a group of people sitting in front of a computer is unbelievably difficult. So yeah, I really respect all the teachers and students putting up with this. It's been a lot. And the field season got canceled last summer because of COVID. So none of us were allowed to go up to Nunavut or Ellesmere, which for me, it was the first time in 6 years not going to the Arctic. And so that was a bit of a shock. It was my first summer ever in Vancouver, which turned out to be very beautiful. But for some people, it meant shifting their entire master's thesis by a year because they couldn't collect the data that they needed to run the analyses that they were supposed to be doing now, but can't do anything. So it's definitely been interesting. And I guess I'm also running the Varsity Outdoors Club at UBC. And as an outdoors club that gets together in large events, currently everything is canceled. So finding ways to bring that community together and maintain the sense of sort of culture that we would normally have when we can't do any of our normal activities has been really difficult this year. Our membership went from 1,000 members down to 300 members just because we can't do anything. So it's been interesting.
Thank you, Cassandra. You know, that's a good point, is also what brings us together. You know, I'm part of a hiking club. I'm part of a cross-country ski club. We're not supposed to get together in a big group, so you're supposed to go out with one or two people. I do en plein air painting, right? When we were told you can't go out with your group, even though you could be 6 feet away, you could be 60 feet away. It was the optics. You weren't supposed to get together with more than 3 people. And so that changed everything, right? So you went from, like you said, 1,000 people at your varsity club to 300. So so, you know, apathy is a big issue. And this is something I've never had to speak to my girls, because all of you are so driven. You've been community volunteers. You've worked with as mentors, and you've worked as mentees. You've supported other initiatives in your community, and apathy has never been it's not ever come up in an interview conversation with you on the phone ever, or when I've met you, you know, at an event with students on ice. I don't even know the word apathy with regard to all of my close to 500 of my women and girls who've been supported by Leacross. Apathetic? No, that's not something we use here. So let's hear from Hannah. How have you been handling life? What university are you at right now?
I'm at Queens.
You're at Queens and Kingston. So did they have online or you're online as
Yeah,
well?
for me, it's completely online. And the way they're handling it in computer science is there's pretty much no live classes. So it's really up to you to make your own schedule. And I found last semester, I kind of struggled to know when to take breaks. Because if you have your whole to-do list for the whole week on Monday, it's hard to know how hard you have to work every day because you're not going anywhere. So I feel like I've got a better handle on that now, just kind of gotten used to it. But also the thing about Queens is that they start you off pretty general in first year.
Mhm.
And then the next year, you'll probably split into a different stream.
Okay.
So I'm in a different stream, and like the people that I've met last year aren't all in it. So it's been interesting to try and navigate being in a almost new program with different people, but not really meeting anyone in it. Um, so like joining clubs, like I'm in the Queens Women in Computing Club, and joining clubs helps with that because you can still talk to people who are in your program, and it's nice to do that to feel more connected, but that's definitely been a struggle too.
What are you doing physical? We know that Cassandra's doing her 16-kilometer ride in BC that doesn't have lots of snow and minus 30 degrees. So we won't talk to you anymore, Cassandra. Sorry, just joking. And Michaela, you're getting out. And are you running? What are you doing, Michaela?
Yeah, I was running a lot in the fall, and then sadly I had a bit of a foot injury over the holidays, so I haven't been running in a while. But while I'm home, I've been walking my dog every morning for like a good hour. So that's been really nice because we have a park really close by, so that's pretty nice. But
Okay, Hannah, what are you doing? Come on, you have to get out there. What are you doing to keep your mind and body clear in Kingston?
I like to go for runs by the water in Kingston. We're
Sure.
lucky to be right on the water, so that's nice. And I also live in a house with 5 girls, so we all try and get out for a walk at least once a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was one of with our alumni resiliency, we talked about, self-care, and because all of you are so driven, you accomplish so many projects, you have a high goals for yourself. At the same time, within this pandemic, it's almost impossible to keep going without burning out. And so you have to take a different tack. Now, I'm older and wiser at times. And so I've learned that when I don't want to do something, I go out for a ski or a walk and so long, bye-bye. And so it's important that you say no. It's really important. So we're going to move on now because obviously we work with women in STEM. There was a very good article that came out recently about women in businesses in Canada and in all the underrepresented careers. Engineers Canada, we worked with them at one point. They have a goal 30 by 30, which means 30% engineers women by the year 2030. It is fascinating when you have an association that's trying with I call them interesting little phrases, 20 by 20, 30 by 30. And what happens here is that means that if we hit our mark of 30, we've done it. Women account for 52% of the population of the world. So I'm not going to stop until it's 51%. And I don't care if it's by 2030 or 2025 or 2022. So I ask you, going into the STEM fields, what supports did you have when you thought about doing it? And we'll start with who were the supports, and then also what were some of the naysayers when you were looking at, you're in high school, you're coming up. I'm a biologist as well, and I remember being at McGill in an engineering department. I was one of the only girls at the time. I'm 19, walking through the engineering department, knowing that they had a paper that was a completely sexist paper in the engineering department in the 1970s. So I ask you, what were your supports while you're going through school, and how did it spur you on to go into a STEM field? We'll start with Hannah. We'll go to you first.
I would say I was really lucky to have some women teachers in my coding classes in high school, and I really struggled in those at first, but they were really good to push me and support me to get through those. And I also participated in an app building competition for girls, and everyone who was helping to organize that was really, really supportive of everyone participating. So that kind of helped me to believe in myself, because I would probably say my biggest naysayer about entering STEM was probably myself. Just because I kind of assumed I wasn't good enough, or I didn't know what I was doing, or I didn't belong, because most of my classes were full of guys who were really good at math and like really technical at everything. And I was just like, that's not me. I don't belong in STEM. So having women to support me as mentors and help me to believe in myself definitely put me on the path to entering into computer science.
So I just, that's a beautiful segue. I'll just interject here for a minute, because yesterday I was interviewing two women who are helping out with women in tech at Dow. And one of them pointed out that she was sitting in a group in computer science. She'd come over from Egypt. And she said there were 11 guys and her. And every time she tried to talk, they would talk over her. And she said, so then I try again, and then they would talk over her again. And I said to her after, I said, what you needed was an ally in the room, a guy who would say, hey, she, you know, let's just call her Sarah. Sarah had a really great idea. Why don't we listen to Sarah? And then that changes the dynamic. But it's fascinating, the whole naysayers and we're really hard on ourselves, as well as the fact that we really think that we have an imposter syndrome somehow because we don't have math. We're not capable of all this other stuff. However, women are using iPhones just as much as the boys. So there. And we know what we want from it. So thank you, Hannah. That's wonderful for you to share that. Okay, I'll go over to Cassandra. So what were your supports while you were going? You cannot use Students on Ice. That obviously was a support, but you'd already gotten to that point where you were going. So what was going through you with your education through high school, and how did it go, and who were the naysayers?
So my mom was a physics professor and my dad was a stay-at-home dad. So I grew up in a household that was, I guess you could say, completely reversed. And I fully believed women belonged in science. In fact, I thought growing up when I was very young that like women were professors and fathers were stay-at-home dads. And slowly as I grew up, I realized that not everybody saw the world this way. And that surprised me. So I think I'm always surprised a little bit when I hear the reverse still. But I also noticed that, yeah, the people you're around affect you tremendously in your views and how you, think the world works. But I was extremely lucky because I, felt like I belonged in science. Although in high school, I do know that a lot of people were like, oh, well, you're good at English. You're good at the social sciences. Go that way. And it was like, no, I'm interested in science. I want to know how the world works.
Okay.
And so I think that, I knew I wanted to do science for a very, very long time.
So that goes back to role models. So she had the reverse role models that many of us have been involved in. And so she, Cassandra, you didn't even think twice about it. Your mother was, she had a degree in physics. It's like, okay, you know what? She's the female Stephen Hawking, so this is fascinating. And then you got out into the real world. Did in any of the places that you worked, did you find that there were some questions about your ability because you were a woman, a girl in a STEM field? Did you experience that at all?
I find kind of constantly there is this questioning, and I think there is a questioning of everyone, and everybody at some point feels like they're a bit of an imposter, but it's difficult to work out how much of that is due to your gender versus the context of the situation.
Right.
So people question me all the time. And some of that I think is good, and some of that I view as a challenge. But yeah, I think if you really want to do something, it doesn't matter too much what other people think you should or shouldn't do. I think, like Hannah said, it's a lot to do with what you believe you can do.
I think it's also the fact that you almost have to, don't take yourself too seriously, because other people might ask you lots of questions, and you, like, as you're saying, Cassandra, take it on and say, okay, I don't know that answer. Let me go figure that out. I'll get back to you. You know, you don't always have to answer right away. And I was speaking to another girl recently about that. You know, she said, I don't think quickly on my feet. I said, none of us do. You don't have, you're not, this isn't an improv class. Like, quickly, let's get the answer. I said, if somebody asks you a question and you're not sure, okay, you know what? Let me think about it. And usually we're deeper thinkers because we want to look at, what's the solution here? Is it a gray area? Maybe there are more answers to that question. From what way were they asking that? What kind of level? So thank you, Cassandra. You know, don't take yourself too seriously, and laugh it off if somebody almost challenges you. So over to you, Michaela. What did you go through growing up and going through high school? And then, you know, naysayers, go for it. You're in chemical engineering, so there are more women in chemical engineering than in mechanical or computers. Am I correct?
Well, I would say that probably depends on where you go to school and where you are working in the field. I know at Queen's they have a really high ratio of women in engineering, and they're very proud of this. They're nearing 30% in their incoming class, I believe, but this is something they strive for, and there's definitely a higher percentage in chemical engineering. Especially in my stream, I'm in a biochemical engineering, and there does seem to be a lot of women pursuing that field. But I guess growing up, similar to Cassandra, my mom was a math teacher, so not a physics professor, but a math teacher, and both my parents had degrees in math, actually. So math was always an emphasized thing. You know, I mean, I needed to know my times tables for sure. So to be considered a valid member of the household. So so I suppose growing up, like, math was not, or STEM was not necessarily, I didn't feel discouraged by my family unit in STEM whatsoever. But I also didn't necessarily feel encouraged by it until I think I was I took physics in grade 11. And I was kind of someone who going through, like, I was pretty, like, you know, I liked all my classes. I wasn't ready to go straight into chemistry. I wasn't like, I love chemistry so much that this is what I want to study forever. But when I was in grade 11, I had this one physics teacher, and he was like, he was a super supportive, and he was kind of like, you know, like, you are actually really good at this. And I didn't really, I don't know if some of the other, you guys were saying this as well, but it's kind of like, you don't really realize sometimes that, I don't know if this is as a woman more so, but you don't really necessarily notice when you're actually good at something until someone points it out, and you kind of assume everybody else is the same. And so he was really encouraging of me going into a STEM field. And then conversely, though, my art teacher was really saying, you know, he thought I was really creative. So these are both male role models I had, actually, in high school, teachers that I really connected with. And he was saying, you know, like, he thought I had really good creativity. And so that's what actually encouraged me to do engineering, is because these two professors were kind of saying, like, go into something that you can bridge these different subjects into one. So, but I would say that going through high school, there was definitely more boys in my physics class and stuff like that. But you know, I don't know what to say about that. I feel nothing but support, to be honest, in my STEM program. So
wonderful. So getting to that point, one of the things that, you know, the world has changed a lot since women started going into engineering, into math. You had some male allies that obviously helped to encourage you, to make you believe in yourself. I like the idea of the creative aspect as well as math, putting them together. You have engineers. There was a story I heard, a friend of mine, actually, she was an engineer, and she was talking about Engineers Without Borders. You've heard of Doctors Without Borders, MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières. But so I said to her, you know, why do women feel that they can't be engineers? But they can, because they sometimes think outside of the box. And she said, here's an example. We were looking at building a bridge in an African country, in the continent. And the engineer guys were being really great about thinking where the bridge was going to be and, you know, making it most accessible. And then the women engineers said, wait a second, it's the women in the village who go to get the water. It's the women in the village who go to collect this and that. They're the ones who need to use the bridge all the time, not the guys. So let's talk to the villagers. Let's talk to the women villagers and see where they'd like to put the bridge. And that's what happened. They built the bridge based on where the women in the community needed it the most. And so it was thinking outside the box rather than just going along with, well, we're engineers, we're going to build a bridge. So sometimes we multitask, which is a really important aspect. I'm not saying all women do. And we tend to minimize that, but we're often thinking of many things at the same time. So one of the questions that I'd like to ask you is, what would you say to younger girls now, the way our system, I mean, obviously we're in COVID right now, so most kids aren't even at school, but what, I guess, what processes should be in place for encouraging girls? Now, one of the examples, I went to Carleton University in the summer, 2 summers ago. Ladies can code, girls can code. Is that the name of it, Hannah?
Girls Who Code?
Girls Who Code.
There's also ladies learning code.
Yeah, so there's ladies who code, and while they were doing a girls' camp, teaching these kids, and they were all young, they were all between the ages of 7 and 10, and they were coding, they were learning to code. So, and they were happy, they were creating these games and these ideas, and they were just comfortable in their skin. You know, they weren't imposters, they weren't trying to be something they weren't, they were just happy-go-lucky kids. So what kind of processes, structure should be in place to encourage younger girls to not feel that imposter syndrome, to not question, oh gee, I'm good at math. You're younger than me, go for it. What would you suggest that we need in elementary and high schools or elsewhere, you know, camps? I don't know. Who would like to go first? Okay, Hannah, go to you first.
Okay. That's funny that you mentioned ladies learning code, because that was the first like coding experience that I had, was when I was 10. I did a workshop that they put on. Okay. And I remember just thinking it was so cool. And it was like these really amazing women who were teaching us. And so that's when I got more interested in it. But then I think the next year I did a summer camp, a coding summer camp at Carleton University. Mm-hmm. And there was about 40 boys and 2 girls. And I was just thinking to myself, like, okay, I was wrong. Like, this is not for me. Like, I don't think I belong here. But if I hadn't done that first course, then I feel like I really would have given up, because that experience stuck with me. So just encouraging girls to do courses like that, where they have a really safe space to learn that they feel comfortable in and that they belong in can go a long way. But also exposing them to STEM subjects earlier, I think would make a big difference. Like I know in high school, computer science, for example, is completely optional and you can't take it till grade 10. It's not even mandatory to take computer science to go into a degree in computer science because not all schools even offer it. So I think exposing younger girls to things like coding and sciences puts the idea of being in STEM in their brains earlier, which could go a long way.
I totally agree with you. I think we all have had an experience. You said ladies learning code. I remember I had to take a summer course at McGill, but they didn't have the course. So I had to take a geology course at Concordia at the time. And this guy was crazy. And he took us out on field trips every Saturday. We ended up going to a gliding school at the same time. So I learned all about gliding, airplanes. It was interesting. But boy, the rocks we learned and how he got us out there on the field trips was absolutely mind-boggling. That's when I knew that I wanted to go and continue learning about earth sciences, you know, because I could see it. It was fascinating. So thanks, Hannah. I really appreciate that. And the idea of having it earlier, I agree with you. I mean, I was a high school teacher, so I know that it was grade 10. It's called DIC. You could take a computing course, but you didn't need it. And I think things will change now because of using technology and COVID. So over to you, Michaela. You were next in line, and then Cassandra. Michaela, what would you suggest that we need in order to enhance and encourage young girls?
Well, I'm coming from a bit of a different perspective from Hannah in that I didn't know about computer science as an interesting field until I came to first year university and I actually had a course, at which point I felt almost behind because everybody else had taken a course in computer science. And so I was frantically trying to learn it. And at the time I was like, you know, the first month I was like, this is awful. I don't like this. I'm so bad at it. I don't understand. And then by like a few months in, I was like, this is actually really cool. You know, like once you kind of learn it, it's really an interesting thing to do. And so I think that for me, I never knew about, I don't know, maybe there were these programs for girls in robotics kind of programming fields. I did not do one. So I think having a program like that at school, like whether it be like an extra club maybe that was girls oriented, or even just even I think Hannah was mentioning this, like incorporate it into the curriculum. In Nova Scotia, our high school starts in grade 10, our public high school. And so, and that's when you take just a general grade 10 science, but maybe like if we cut the weather unit in half, we could do something on something on coding or really just learning a little bit about more about computers, about technology. I mean, I know now too, the day and age is completely changed. I mean, I'm pretty young, I'm 19, but my family, like I was learning to type when I was 10, you know what I mean? Like coding wasn't on my radar whatsoever. But nowadays, you know, kids, they start typing at, you know, super young because it's just part of the whole thing. So I think if we could incorporate now when kids go to a computer lab, if they already know how to type, like in elementary school, they might go to a computer lab, and that's maybe an opportunity where they could start teaching them what possibilities there are in that realm. So
I agree. I sadly I would say that curriculum in many school boards haven't caught up to the real world applications. And so, you know, these courses have existed for a long time. I hate to say it, but your physics course that you took in high school, I probably took the same course in high school in Montreal. And so it's important that curriculum gets modified more quickly and adapts to the real world. You know, you can bring a 2-year-old. I have a great niece and nephew, you know, they're 4 years old. And when they touch any static poster, they go like that to it. And I go, Lila, what are you doing? And she goes, I'm trying to make it bigger. And I'm going, no, this is called a sign. You can't do it to a sign. You just look at the sign. You read the sign. You can't make it bigger. You can't make it smaller. That's just normal. They go to the computer and that's what they do. So it's really, it is a new world. It is a new, you're almost old now, girls. I hate to tell you. The 4-year-olds are ahead of you and they're going to be coding. So I agree with you. I think that the curriculum has to change big time to accommodate them. The other thing you mentioned, which is a good point, is making them feel safe. And some of the courses that we have supported, women in electrical engineering, we created a course for them, specifically 22 women. So they could do it at their own speed. They actually doubled the speed in which they completed the courses at this college that we worked at. And that's why we did it, because they were all working women. They wanted to get their electrical engineering technology. And we knew that having a segregated classroom where they could just jump into it quickly, they did. Some of them then moved on and continued, and what's the word I want to use? They were put into the regular stream, but in that case, it was like 5 women to 30 men, you know, and that changes the dynamic. I'm not saying that we always have to have sequestered, but I do feel in order to make girls feel more comfortable, then you might as well put them with their target groups at the beginning, just to get them comfortable so they can ask the bigger questions. So if you had to choose one person or 1 or 2 people who have been your biggest supports, your allies, who would they be? Who were they? I think we've already talked about it, but I just want to clarify. So going over to Cassandra this time, who would be your biggest ally as you've gone through life in STEM and doing stuff you've done that you admire?
Probably my parents. They have been very, very supportive. And yeah, I've learned a huge amount from them. And I think, yeah, I look up to them.
Okay. Michaela, who's your biggest ally? Who would you look at who's really that has given you the most support as you've gone, you navigated this part of the world and life?
Well, definitely, I would say, like Cassandra, my mother has definitely given me a lot of guidance, and then my sister as well, from a younger perspective and a little bit closer. She does some crazy things that I get inspired by, so yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hannah, go for it.
Continuing on the trend, I would also say my parents. My dad especially, he worked in the tech industry, so he was the one signing me up for all the coding camps when I was 10 years old. And I just did it, but I'm really glad that he did, and they've always supported me and believed in me. So
what's one thing, Hannah, that you wish you would have been told, that now when you look back, something you wish somebody would have said to you?
I would say, like, I have to remind myself about this sometimes too, but when you're in like a big lecture or class and it feels like there's like 5 girls and like 100 guys, like that's not, there's like so many women out there who are already working, and even within the school and different classes, different programs and different years, like I would just tell myself, I guess, and I do tell myself, that you're definitely not alone, and there are people that you can relate to who are doing the same thing, even if they're not sitting beside you.
That's really wise, because as you say, we all have someone who went before us, who has created the environment that you're allowed to be in now. And I think about that too. You know, I didn't experience that in the 70s, but I experience it now. I don't question when I walk into a room that somebody's going to ask me, what are you doing here? You know, Cassandra, what would you like to have been told that you feel like it would have helped you along the way if you look back?
Sometimes we question ourselves. Is it just us that's struggling? And knowing that everybody struggles. They may not complain about it, they may not verbalize it, but everyone is going through like tricky times to figure out the subjects that they're studying or the research that they're doing. And it's completely okay. It's like part of the normal process, the required process of learning. So yeah, don't question yourself when you're learning something and you don't understand it, because you have to go through that.
Cassandra, you're lovely because you really do say that, you know, you say, it's okay. I don't know. I'm learning it. That's okay. Somebody else learned it. Somebody had to learn it first, right? So you're just following that footsteps, right?
And sometimes I think women are very quick to question themselves, whereas other people stay quiet and they pretend they know it, and they pretend that they never had to learn it.
Oh yeah.
But everybody goes through the learning process, and it's good to. It's required.
It's required, yes. At least be a little bit humble, knowing that you are just one of many who have to learn something. We all started learning our times table at some point. Going over to Michaela, what would you say?
If I was to tell myself something, I think it would be like, don't be afraid to like, it's okay not to do well. It's okay not to understand something, because yeah, it doesn't, you know, like everybody doesn't understand that, like there's something that troubles everybody. So you know, I mean, just feeling like you can go and even just feeling like it's okay to fail something, like you know, there's so much emphasis on grades and many of these programs. So but I think that, you know, grades don't define your interests, and if you're interested in something, you don't have to have a super good grade in it. It's just you just gotta learn to accept what your abilities are and try and follow what you're actually interested in. And you know, so
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying there. Yeah, you need to, well, like you say, you don't have to be perfect in everything that you do. You've heard the expression 10,000 hours will get you to be, you know, an expert. Well, that's if you want to spend 10,000 hours in certain things. It's not, you know, many of us have been pushed into something because, as you pointed out, and, you know, Michaela, you were saying the idea, the juxtaposition of putting together art with engineering, thinking outside the box. So for example, you could be an engineer. Cassandra, you know, you're working in biology. You could write a book. That's putting together writing and expression and biology. Hannah, you know, I was speaking to a young woman the other day who's working in video games, and she indicated to me that she's the only woman in the video game department at her internship. And I went, okay, how are you feeling? And she said, frustrated, because when I go to a meeting, I'm never heard, but I love video games and I love designing them, you know? And so it's important that we acknowledge that we don't stay in one field. So this is a great segue to my last question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And we'll assume that COVID is over by the end of 2021 and life goes on. So let's look at our wish list, our dream list. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And if you need to take your time, take it. What are you thinking about? Okay, whoever wants to go first. 5 years. We'll start with 5. Okay, Hannah.
I mean, I really don't know for sure, but
Okay,
right
sure.
now what I'm
What'd you
thinking
like?
is I'm interested. I'm also really passionate about like design on top of computer science.
Okay.
So I'm interested in user experience design, which is when you design apps and websites and things like that. So hopefully I'm working in that, but at the same time, I think it would be really cool to somehow be doing something that's creating change. And that's kind of a big ask if you're working for another company, but maybe on the side or in some way using my degree to create change and help other girls.
Okay, I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Hannah, Cassandra, Michaela?
I guess hopefully I will be done my PhD studying Arctic plants and genomics. Yeah, and I'm interested in continuing in bioinformatics and studying how genomes evolve, but also in the context of the Arctic. I think it's been sort of a consistent part of my life for more than a decade now, and I want to keep, yeah.
With regard to genomes, I mean, that's a huge discovery. I mean, I remember taking my genetics course at McGill. We didn't know a whole lot back then, and so that's a field that is never ending. So you could apply it to so many species, to everything that we know. Genomes. Okay. Would you see yourself living in the Arctic or doing what you've been doing, as in commuting back and forth in the summer?
I've dreamed about living in the Arctic. Yeah, one of my plans in the future for sure is to move up north if I ever get the opportunity. One of my largest dilemmas is that super high caliber research currently is done at the big institutions, which don't happen when you go to these remote communities or these small places. But those small places are also where I desperately want to be, so that I can, yeah, feel the place that I'm learning about and really know the plants or the organisms that I'm studying. So that is definitely a difficulty for me, but I don't like going back and forth. It doesn't feel right.
You want to stay there. You'd like to do actually more hands-on there, but continue taking the research that's necessary from the big institution to the area. That would make a lot more sense. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you, Cassandra. And Michaela? Yes.
Well, I find the research that's going on in innovation in the chemical and biochemical engineering field really interesting. And there's a prof at Queen's who's actually developing algae-based plant milk as a solution to not only some of the carbon emissions associated with cow-based milk, but also solutions to hunger in many developing countries and things like that. So that sort of innovation is really interesting to me, as well as materials. So I think I'd like to do some research kind of work, but I also just would want to keep trying new things, because I think there's so many things out there, and we start to narrow so quickly. I mean, I'm narrowing into biochemical engineering after in my second year, but I feel like I'm still interested in other aspects. So I also feel like I'm still I hope that I'm still learning things in 5 years, and trying to keep branching and keeping my options open, and yeah, just trying new things. So that's what I hope to be happening then.
I will give you wise words of wisdom here, and this is why we set up the internships at the Ottawa Heart Institute. One of my young women, who's a biomedical engineer, went to work there for 4 months. And she was in the operating lab. It was open heart surgery. And the open heart surgeon said to her, "Come on over here. You want to take a look at what I'm doing?" And of course, her answer at that moment was, no, you're concentrating. Just keep doing what you're doing. She was freaking out because he was actually turning to her to say, "Come on, look, the chest was open, the heart was beating." She was in open heart surgery. And she was like, "Okay, I'll come over. This is great." And I remember when we sat down at the exit interview, when she finished her internship there, I said, "So what was the most exciting piece?" She went, "Are you kidding me? I got to see the human heart beating. I got to see the most amazing researchers work at the Ottawa Heart Institute. This has been eye-opening, the clinical experience." And so I say to you, be careful getting locked in at a university. Make sure you have opportunities. Ask lots of questions. If you meet somebody who's interesting, ask them what they're doing and see if you can join them. It's really, really important. Hannah, when you talk about design, user apps, you know, one of the women who's in computer science, she said that as well. She wanted to work with changing the way we interact with our computers that make it more intuitive for women, not the way the men do it. Trust me, if you've looked at drop-down menus that make no sense, that's my brain. I kind of look there and go, I don't know what I'm doing. So that's why I say keep your options open, because there's so much out there and you don't know what you don't know. That's the only way I can say it. When I was finishing high school, I wrote in my little, underneath my biology, you know, my little bio, I said to be omniscient is to know what you don't know. So I wanted to know what I don't know. I know I don't know a lot. And as I've gotten older, I know I'd even know less, which is kind of scary. I thought I knew more, but I actually know less. So keep your options open, okay? And get those allies behind you who won't question that you're a woman, you're a girl, that you don't know much, you're not sure, you know, you don't have that math. Well, it doesn't matter. You might have other skills that allow you to create something that is right out of this world and become the next billionaire, please. I'd really appreciate that. So I could look to you and say, okay, what are you giving back? Do you have any last words of wisdom before we finish? This has been great. I love you guys. So any comments?
Maybe just thanks. That was a really nice conversation. It's really nice to talk about this sort of stuff because sometimes you go a long time without actually talking about this with other people. So it was really nice.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. And as I said, I really wanted to be in your classroom to say you got the award. Anyone else?
And yeah, and also I just wanted to add thanks to Roslyn for keeping us connected. I mean, it's so cool that I was able, and you know, Hannah, who we were on the same expedition, but also Cassandra, who, you know, I never would have met otherwise. And it's really cool that we're taking advantage of these virtual opportunities that have presented themselves to keep the Leacross community connected.
Right. Thank you. And we're having another Zoom call after February 16th. You're supposed to eat chocolate and drink wine. So just so you know, you have to do it. I'm not sending you any more chocolate, guys. You're on your own. But I would love to see you then. And again, it's not about me. It's about connecting to other women who are like yourselves. I somehow see a synergy, Michaela, with you, with Cassandra, because she's working in plants and you're looking at plant algae to create milk products. I don't know, I'm seeing biochemistry and biology working together. And then Hannah will create the app that will put it together so that you can buy the product. There you go, we're all done. So Cassandra, do you have anything to say? I'm not gonna leave you out there.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for these conversations. It is really, really appreciated.
You're not alone. It's what Hannah said. You're not alone in this world. There are a lot of women out there who are taking the first step in something that has never been done before. Okay. So I want to thank everyone for this winter fireside chat in the month of February. Michaela, sitting in Halifax, near Halifax, Nova Scotia. Cassandra, who's out in the West Coast, and Hannah, who is in Kingston. There's no question that technology has allowed us to come together. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm glad you all got onto a Students on Ice voyage when we could do it. I agree, it was life changing for me. And the impression of a Lillesat, when I saw the icebergs there, that really changed the way I saw the world. So I want to thank you all, and you're just amazing women. So thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
So thank you all. And this is being recorded this time. And
and